The views and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited.
Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with the panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bount, who will be discussing current events today. So, gentlemen, what is happening today and what is most on your mind?
Trump suggests deporting families with mixed immigration status. So, if you're, and the picture on Axios has him standing there with the black shirts.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. A straight face deporting U.S. citizens.
It just seems to make sense to him that we would do that.
Well, it's first of all, it's unconstitutional. If you were born here, you're a citizen. That's kind of the way it is.
He says we're the only country that does that. But we certainly, it's in the Constitution, so that is kind of our agreed upon rule book. And whether he likes it or not, it is in the Constitution. And all these people who run around there going, we got to stick to the Constitution, really need to think that one through.
Yeah, no doubt. And the impact on our people just don't understand the impact on our economy. I mean, that would be. About 4 weeks ago, somebody was having a roof replaced here in the neighborhood. And on the roof, I'm going to guarantee you, there probably wasn't an American citizen in the bunch.
Yeah. It's like that all over, yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
So
who's going to do it?
I just wanted to ask you a question. How likely do you think it is that President-elect Trump will simply go ahead and violate the Constitution, such as the 14th Amendment, and actually get away with it because the Senate and the House will not stand up to him? They'll be afraid to do it in case he ignores them, and the Supreme Court will also, for the same reason, vote for him or with him, because they will be afraid to tell him no, just in case he ignores them.
If we start ignoring the Constitution, we have no country left. And that's all there really is to it. The stopgap to this, violating the 14th Amendment would be the Supreme Court. Now the question comes down to, is the Supreme Court a legitimate body or are they not? Now you can disagree with the Roe versus Wade decision and the overturning the Dobbs and all that. That's perfectly fine. You can be on either side of that. But we're talking about the Constitution itself now. We're talking about an amendment in the Constitution. And, Trump says, well, we're the only country that does that, which is incorrect because Canada, Brazil, and dozens of other nations actually offer birthright citizenship. So, again, another lie. But if we start allowing the Constitution to be violated by the President of the United States, we have a problem. So, although I don't have great faith in the Supreme Court at this point in time, as it's made up, you have to sit back and you have to say that's your firewall right there. That's got to be your firewall. Congress doesn't matter what they do. Who cares what they do? They make laws. Now, you're not going to get the amendment overturned. We've already talked numerous times about how difficult it is to even present an amendment or change the Constitution. It's absolutely massively difficult. So the Supreme Court, and if this was to come up, it would be interesting to see exactly how much of a pretzel the Supreme Court might try to turn itself into to be able to say that this is legit. And that would expose them if they tried to do that, that would expose them for the sham that many people believe that they are. My hope is they would not. My hope would be that they would say, you know what? Hey, this is a pretty good gig. This judge for life kind of thing, highest court in the land, pretty good gig. We got to do what's right. And the Constitution is always what's right. I can't see Anton Scalia saying, yeah, that'd be fine. And Anton Scalia was about as conservative as I get. I just can't see him doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to push back a little on that because there have been some really bad Supreme Court decisions, and there's some bad stuff in the Constitution. Hopefully, this will, I don't know. Hopefully, this is a negotiating tactic and not something that he would actually consider. But I'm sure in his head he wants to do this. And it's just a matter of stopping him. What I find really disturbing, and I didn't watch the whole interview, but during that interview when she would ask him stuff and he would say these crazy things, you just go on to the next question. I don't care if you only got one question. You just say, look, dude, you are so wrong about this. You have no idea what you're talking about, and just really hammer him. And if he wants to get up and walk out on the interview, fine. He'll be back because he needs the press. He craves the press. And they've got to start holding his feet to the fire a little bit more in the media before anything is going to happen, because the people who are watching it have to be able to see that you can push back on this stuff and not let him say the craziest things that anybody's ever said in this country. So, I don't want to presuppose what Trump's going to do. I'm going to try to enjoy these last couple of months, this last month of not having Trump, in my face every day. There's a lot of disturbing signals out there about Elon Musk and about, putting out tweets like, if foreign entities, companies come in with $1 billion, we're going to waive all the environmental requirements and everything that you want. I mean, there's like some crazy stuff that he's putting out there. And I don't feel like responding to every single one of them because it's too exhausting. So I'd rather just wait until he's actually president and see what happens, and then you can always hammer him then. But if he goes on an interview, if he were to ever come on this podcast, I hope we would hammer him real good about the stupid stuff that he says all the time, and have him walk off rather than just kind of, okay, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, but I'm going to move on to the next question because I have so many questions to ask you. What's the point of asking questions if all the guy's going to do is either say crazy things or lie to you? I really don't understand. We're in a strange period right now. We've seen this with other countries, mostly with, with these sort of quasi dictatorships like Hungary, where they control the media and people hear the bullshit and they believe it. And, that becomes the new reality. So that's up to our media to push back on, I think.
Yeah, and they've got to get out of this idea, and I've said this numerous times on this podcast. The office of the presidency, you've got to divide from the person that is the president. We should respect the office, but also we should take a really good, realistic evaluation of the person that is in the office. And I think that's where the media gets the problem. They don't want to push back because, it's the president. Well, okay, so what? So what? He's not the king. We don't have to genuflect. And the fact that the press is so afraid to take on the man, take on the person, because he holds the office, it boggles my mind. And yes, if he was ever to come on, we would pound him down. I mean, I'm sorry, he would get pounded down. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I don't care that you're the president. Guess what? The president of the United States works for us. He works for us, not us for him. And that's the attitude people have got to start taking. And we're going to hold you accountable. We fired you in 2020. Now, for some unknown reason, we rehired you again in 2024. But guess what? We could fire you again in 2028 or your minions in 2026. So, I mean, this idea that government is on this pedestal and they're afraid to, even with congressmen, they're afraid to go to their congressman and say, hey, wait a minute. They just won't do it.
He's not supposed to be able to run again in 2028.
Well, and again, that's correct. He won't run again. He will not run again. We'll see.
Or if he does, it's because somehow the 22nd Amendment doesn't work anymore. And if that happens, we should nominate Barack Obama to run against him. Let's have it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there you go. I mean, again, that's if you want to play that game, you can play it. It goes both ways. But this concept that people in government are above the constituency, when the fact is they work for the constituency. They are accountable, and we've stopped holding people accountable in this country. We don't hold them accountable for their actions. And with Trump, for his words, we don't hold them accountable. It's become a new normal. And this is something that has been happening probably over the last 10 years, I would say. Can you imagine if a Barack Obama or even a George W. Bush said some of this stuff? I mean, that's even, it's just insane. It is insane to think that this is the same Republican Party that it was during Reagan, or even during Bush number 2, or even Bush 1, any of them. This is not the same. And as I've said in previous episodes, this is the thing that frightens me. What frightens me isn't the leaders. What frightens me is the constituency, who are unwilling to hold their leaders accountable, unwilling to call bullshit when they hear it, unwilling to stand up for themselves, vote against their own best interests, and if it's not directly impacting them, not caring. That's not what society is about. That's not what a responsible citizen does. And we are becoming a country of totally irresponsible citizens, and almost to the point where they're not even citizens anymore. They're just a gaggle. And
right.
That's, I mean, it is. It's almost a gaggle.
Look, Mark, a significant number of people, okay, maybe even a material number of people, voted in this last election on name recognition alone. And they were so ignorant that they got to the polling place and they didn't even realize that, well, they couldn't figure out why Joe Biden wasn't on the ballot. And they said, I don't know who this guy Harris is, but I've never heard of him before, and I'm not voting for him. And they voted for Trump because that was the name that they recognized. And, they went home and they said, why wasn't Biden on the ballot? I mean, that's the level of the intellect that we're talking about here, and the neglect of knowing what's going on in the country that so many people in this country have displayed of late. So, the idea that they're going to be sheep easily led along and not understand what's going on, that seems right on in line with what's going on with the country. So, I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know, but the British Virgin Islands are looking a lot better every single day.
Yeah.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, who is our editing partner, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. We'd also like to thank iHeart Radio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.